Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of April of 2023. Today we have some updates, so let's start. And of course before we start, I wish you a happy Easter, of course. It is the most important piece of news for today, I believe so. And I believe that based on that we see that there are no changes on the ground, there weren't much updates from the parties, from the Ukrainian side and from the Russian side, just regular clashes and so on. The Russians during the day published a number of videos saying about their progress, about some things that they managed to do during the previous days. From the Ukrainian side, they published from their own side a few updates about their situation on the ground. But as we can see, that there were no official Easter ceasefire, and it wasn't announced by the parties. But when talking about the situation on the ground, we can see that there is an official Easter ceasefire from both sides. There are very heavy clashes, of course, but we see that there are no changes on the ground. So that's why today I believe we will go through along the front lines, along the border, trying to discuss every single icon on the Russian sources map, trying to analyze it. And we will go through the report of Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation about the situation on the ground. And first piece of news we received from the north of the Chernigov area, in this area, from the border with the Bryansk region. The Russians are saying that they published a video that they, during the previous days, I believe that this video was made not even today, but as a result of their attack, air forces attack, they managed to destroy the bridge that, as you can see on the video, they destroyed the bridge that connected, let's say, the north of Chernigov area and the Bryansk area. And if you remember, the Ukrainians were using this area to make their own RECO in combat and commandos operations. During the last months, during the previous 3 months, they managed to cross this area for several times. And as a result of those attacks, they made some kind of terrorist attack in this area. A lot of civilians was killed as a result of those attacks. So that's why the Russians are trying to reduce the possibilities of these groups for any activity in this area. This is from the one side, and from another side, we understand that if the Russians destroy the bridge on this area, that means that maybe they're not planning to use the north of Chernigov area as a possible bridgehead for the Russian upcoming offensive operation. So I believe that the Russians are not going to return on the north of Ukraine and so on. Now let's go to the Kupiansk and Liman front line. As you can see, there are also some icons in this area. The Russians are saying that as a result of clashes on this area, the Ukrainians lost around 90 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and around 2 artillery systems. As you can see, the level of losses are very low. For example, when talking about Liman front line, the Russians are saying that Ukrainians lost just 55 soldiers. We can say that this is the lowest level of losses since the beginning of the special operation. Yesterday, the Ukrainians lost 80 soldiers, according to Ministry of Defense report. The day before yesterday, 50 soldiers. So as you can see, there are many options, many things that the Russians took a decision to do. For example, maybe the Russians are out of some kind of shells or something like this, but they took a decision to slow down or stop their support offensive operation of the Bakhmut operation, and now we see that the level of losses is very low. There are a few icons in this area. For example, the Russians are saying that they managed to discover and to destroy one commandos group. Somewhere in the Kupiansk front line, the Russians report about attacking and bombing of the town by the name of Alshany. In this area, in the vicinity of Kupiansk, the Russians bombed and shelled the town by the name of Ivanovka under Ukrainian control, and Krakhmalna, and so on. Furthermore, the Russians report about destroying some commandos group in the vicinity of Novoselovska. This town was ruined to ruins, by the way. Furthermore, the Russians report about bombing of Stelmakhovka, but as you can see, without changes on the ground. The Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours, they attacked as well the Nevskaya and Yampolovka. They were attacking some Ukrainian positions, and so just regular artillery duels. It was like things that they need to do on the everyday basis without any offensives and without any active clashes. Of course, there are a lot of interesting updates are coming from Serebrenko Forest, because the Russians, no matter the situation on the front lines, they need to storm these areas and to push the Ukrainians. And today the Russians published some videos and photo confirmation of the storming process of the checkpoints and Ukrainian position in this forest. And furthermore, the Russians bombed this area heavily, but also, as we can see, neither of the map has been updated as a result of the previous 24 hours. Now let's move to Bakhmut or Artyomovsk. The Russian source map has been updated. Now this shows their progress according to their version of the situation. The Russian deployment map shows a little bit different situation. They're showing better progress on the central part. The Ukrainians still controls the western part, and the Russians continue their attack from the south, trying to develop their bridgehead along the Korsunskova Street and Tchaikovskого Street. The Russians are trying to storm the railroad station and the territory, the salient on the south, and that connects, like let's say, the southwestern part of Bakhmut and the central part of Bakhmut, but also without any changes on the ground. The Russian sources were saying that there was some progress in the northern part, in the vicinity of Rose Alley in this area. Also, the Russians are saying, published some video and photo confirmation of abandoned tanks in this area, but as you can see, without any changes on the ground. Maybe the Russians took a decision to make a small operational pause that may be connected with the Easter ceasefire or something like this. I believe that tomorrow, on Monday, they're going to restore their pressure, to restore their attacks, and they have a week, as we discussed during the previous videos, because the next week they're going to be Orthodox Easter, and they're going to be Orthodox ceasefire, because Russians are Orthodox. So that's why they're they need to do to reduce the activity during these days according to their religion. So we'll see. They have a week, and we will see what kind of progress they're able to achieve during a week. Now we're going to Avdiivka front line. The Russians are saying that during this weekend and these days there were very heavy clashes, very interesting situation in the vicinity of the northern bridgehead that located on the north of Avdiivka. The Ukrainians have completed their redeployment of their forces in direction of Achertina and this town, and now they're started recon combat in this area, sending drones. They're trying to discover the Russian position, and using the artillery system, they're attacking the Russians in this area. Also, just the regular artillery duels without any progress on the ground. The Russians still control this bridgehead, and maybe the next week the Ukrainians will make another attempt on the ground to push the Russians back. When talking about Peski front line, the Russians report about some offensive operation in direction of the trenches that located between the Avdiivka block number 9 and the Peski and Opitna front line. So they were talking about these blue lines, blue trenches that located between these two areas. The Russians are saying that they had some progress, but they haven't provided any video and photo confirmation of that. I believe that maybe today there was some kind of clearing operation, and if there were some progress, I believe the next few days we're going to see video and photo confirmation. And some sources were saying that the Russians reached the forest line right in front of this 9 block. So we'll see if it's true or not. The Russians were pushing in Marinka, and we can say that when talking about progress, we can say that Marinka is the only area where the Russians managed to achieve some progress on the ground. They're saying that as a result of clashes and storming operation, they managed to clear the southern part of Marinka to complete the clearing of that area. So let's return back to Marinka. So this is the current progress for today. So the northern part, the part on the along the wide street, the central street, and the southern part. So this is the progress for today. We'll see whether the Russians are able to hold this bridgehead or they will be pushed by the Ukrainians by the next days. We'll see, because as we know, this area is under protection of 35th Marine Brigade Ukrainian, and they were pretty successful during the previous months, and they didn't allow the Russians to develop the progress. But if they want to hold the rest part of Marinka, they need to push the Russians back. So I believe that that means that they will try to make counter-offensive operation in this area. Now let's go to the Ugledar area. The Russians are saying there are a lot of icons, as you can see. The Russians are saying that, by the way, about Donetsk area front line, the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost 250 soldiers, 12 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems. So as you can see, the level of losses is very high, but without any changes on the ground. We understand the Ukrainians do have possibilities to send reserves and so on. When talking about South Donetsk area, there are very heavy clashes as well. Artillery duels. The Russians attacks the residential area in the north of Pavlovka. The Russians continue reducing to the ruins Ugledar. The Russians continue attacking in the residential area on the southeast of Ugledar. The Ukrainians from their side are sending commandos to the south, trying to discover the Russian supply roads and trying to coordinate and target the Ukrainians' artillery systems and mainly HIMARS, and then the Ukrainians are using these systems to attack the targets that those commanders were help them to navigate and so on. And as you can see, there are no changes on the ground, but this front line is very active. Maybe we are going to see some activization within a week. When talking about Zaporozhye and Zaporozhye area, as you can see, there were some updates. The Russians destroyed they activated their heavy artillery attacks in direction of Gulyai-Polye and Orekhov, these two towns, trying to reduce and destroy the Ukraine's hangars, ammo depots, fuel depots. For example, the Russians are saying that as a result of their artillery attacks, they managed to destroy 2 ammo depots of 72nd Mechanized Brigade and 102nd Territorial Defense Brigade in Orekhov and Ugledar, so ammo depots. Furthermore, the Russians destroyed 1 fuel depot in the vicinity of the Zaporozhye area somewhere, and of course the Ukrainians were planning to use these fuel depot for the mechanized forces of their brigades in this area for upcoming counteroffensive operation. We understand that the Russians haven't destroyed the mechanized forces, but they destroyed their fuel that these forces can use for the upcoming offensive operation. Very interesting updates are coming from Kherson area. There is just one icon about some kind of artillery duels, but the Russians are saying that as a result of artillery duels in this area, the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers, 11 armored vehicles and 3 artillery systems. So as you can see, the level on the Kherson front line are very high from the Ukrainian side, and they are even higher than the losses on the Kupiansk or Liman front line, where we can find the real combat line, where the Russians and Ukrainians have some kind of at least the points where they can feel and touch and see each other. And when talking about Kherson, there is a river between the parties, and so it's very strange to have such a heavy losses from the Ukrainian side. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds you condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day and happy Easter. Bye bye.